So here's an underpainting for a floral that I did in July. Let's see, this is January 2022. So there's just one layer of base color represented, and if I want to continue on with this piece, I'm going to need to add some mid layers and make some choices about what else I might want to do. So let's use this as an example to explore some of the concepts that we talked about in class. The idea of making marks, making lines to build structure in your piece out of what essentially looks like a bunch of interconnected or slightly connected blobs. Part of what we're doing is looking for places to bring some parts of the structure forward and bring other parts of the structure back. And we do that by mixing up colors that are of the same strength, similar strength, or maybe even a bit darker. But we also want to leave room for shadows and leave some highlights from the initial painting. So I'm just mixing up some color in the background. I've got my big palette here with me. It looks like I marked off some of the colors I used. It's a chrome yellow hue, quadriquinone rose madder, probably marine blue, brown umber. So just that little bit of notes right there that I did in July really helps me figure out what I might want to use. And I'm mixing up a little bit of, looks like I've got some marine blue and burnt umber that I've got up here. Just a little mix of some blues right here that I'm going to use. So I'm going to start over on the left and mark my way to the right because I'm right-handed. And first I'm looking over here at the foliage. I'm going to start with the foliage. I want to leave some of these light marks, and what I'm going to do is come in and create a larger structure here because that's what I want to do. That's my choice. I think I might even bring this down here. Be a little bit careful about outlining like I just did because it's really easy to get a hard line around the outside and then that doesn't look quite as pleasant. I think I'm going to come into this area. Probably done with that for now. Maybe put a little bloop, just some wet into wet right there just to make it more fun. And again, coming into this area, just adding some details, and I think I'm going to want to be able to see that in there further, so I'm going to actually cut into there. This zone, I'm going to bring this over toward this flower, add a little more structure there. So you can basically you can alter your original plan by adding another layer over the top. So I might go ahead and leave that. Go put a little bit of a behind the scenes leaf right there and even out that line. So this would be working wet into dry for the most part. I'll do a little mixing, but for the most part I'm starting with wet into dry and then sometimes adding in a little bit of texture within the marks that I make. I'm switching over to an interesting green here. And I think I want to connect this. So I'm just bringing in some color. And the way that I'm connecting this, I'm just playing a little bit, connecting things. I'm not focusing on making it look really realistic. I'm recognizing that I'm going to bring some of that in with my shadows, and I'm just bringing out some additional greens to make this more vibrant and giving me a chance to use it as a sample for you. So that was square. I don't really want it to be square in the end, so I decided I'm going to change that. I can't overlap with that one, but I could go straight behind it, maybe. Go around it. So something like that. I might want a little more green just for fun, just along this area. I'm working fairly dark. You could do this a little bit lighter if you wanted to, but you notice I'm leaving quite a few places open and available for later on. I'm gonna cut this in here. I'm doing a little lighter version right there. And maybe I bring around something here, just add some green layers. I don't really know what I'm doing on this section yet, but I'm going to kind of turn it into closing it up a little bit. It's not going to be quite as open and stylized as it initially looked. Can clean up this edge a little bit. Probably add some shadow on the bottom of that anyway, so I don't want to get too crazy about cleaning that up. This is a little bit more blue than this, and a little bit less blue than that one. So I do want to mix up a bit cooler. And I'm just taking note at that point that this is the only bright green one. So making a decision here that looks like these blue kind of go with these yellows. Looks like maybe I have a lighter pink that could potentially go with this green. So maybe I should make this and this the same color, or at least a similar color. So I think I will come in with a mix that's a little bit paler for some variety. This is going to go off the page and play with that. And then I'm going to come back in because I do want it to relate to that one. I'm just going to do a little wet and wet by dropping in a few places. Dropping that color into a few places, which is kind of fun. And if this was still wet, you could do the reverse and drop some lighter into there, but that's a technique. I'm showing you two things that are slightly different, which is not necessarily something I would do in the same painting, but I'm just showing you some options there. And I can make them look more similar with the last layer by making their shadows the same, and I can cover up as much as I want in there. Let's see. Now I could choose to come in here and work these flowers a little bit as I work my way over to the right. And I think I will go ahead and do that. Looks like this yellow, the shadows for a yellow, you're going to add a little bit of its complement, which is a purple. And I'm not quite ready to do big time shadows yet, but I think what I'll do is I'll pull out a center in here where the petals are attached, and then just give myself a few small shadows to start. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's kind of a big section there. And think about how many petals I want this to have. You'll notice that the edges are pretty smooth, so this could be more of a cabbage rose type flower, but I'm choosing to go with a little morning glory type appearance. This is where you could get a reference photo out and decide on a specific flower you wanted to copy, or you can do what I'm doing and just play, and then when you have a specific flower you want to do, you can start with more of a sketch from the very beginning And then your base layers would also be informed by that sketch. The placement of every single color would be informed by that. But I'm wanting to focus on the color aspect right now. So I'm actually forcing myself to let go of the perfection of, you know, it looking exactly like a certain type of flower. It's more of a suggestion than a specific flower type. And then I'm just gonna leave it alone, walk away for a minute. Now I can't work on these two on the edges until this dries completely. So I have to either pick another spot or consider how I want these to look. Perhaps these are more of a cabbage rose type. And I could at least begin with the layers in the center. So I'm working up a light pink of the same version, and I'm thinking about how those layers can come together in the center, some overlapping. Right, it comes out. I have this color worked up on my board, so I'm not going to do very much with it. I'm just going to, almost like a peony, how they have those ruffly edges that come together. I'm just going to give myself the suggestion so that later on, I'll pull this one in front a little bit bigger, so that later on I kind of can see, oh, that's what I was going for with that one. Otherwise, it just remains a blob that you have to deal with in a later time. But you have to, it is a good idea to be thoughtful about how dark to put everything down. You don't want to make the common mistake of going so, like this is actually pretty dark over here. I might regret this. But you can always feather it out a little bit so that it's a chunk versus a line. And that will dry a lot lighter than it looks. So I'm going to leave it alone so that I don't overwork it. And I can see already that it looks like I had intended this to be folded over and maybe have an open center in there. So I'm going to change this light pink in the center to more of a yellow. It will kind of work on this one down here. It looks like I went a little bit dark in that section. And then I think I'll go ahead and do it here too, with the understanding that maybe some of this is going to be a petal that's folded over with this centerpiece open. I'm just coming in with those layers to suggest where the center might be. And then I have to leave it alone, because if I come in and touch this yellow at all, it's going to spread onto the petals. And I want there to be a clear distinction between the center area and the bright yellows I'm using and the petals. And I want to make sure I retain some of this lovely lightness in these outer petals a little bit longer. Okay, so now I can go back to some foliage, because I see that I still have some foliage to do. I'm going to let this area dry down here, because I want to go diving right into this center area, but this edge is still wet. I haven't touched anything next to this area though. So I can come in here and cover up that little piece. And my initial sketches did not go all the way up to the edge, but now I am coming in and creating a bit more definition. I'm thinking about what's in front and what's behind, even though right now I'm actually covering some of that up, so it's tougher. We're thinking about it for later. And that will come up in the shadow edition layer, or layers. grab a bit more blue. This edge is a little bit softer, rougher than I wanted it to be, so I'm going to pull some of that out. And I don't like how this is so blue and this is so green. I'm going to do a little bit of what I did in the other area, just a tiny bit coming in here with some of the greens to help connect those two areas. And that's a choice. I don't have to do that. Just kind of thinking about this zone. I think when I painted these, I did have the intention that maybe some of these leaves would be slightly different, but I'm generally coming in with a similar leaf shape right now, just kind of keeping things simple. And you notice I'm not defining any, not doing a lot of defining in terms of centers or striations, veins, things like that in the actual leaf structure. I'm just building up a little bit more weight to the leaves. This would be something I could have done in the initial stages, but I wanted to have the flexibility to choose where I might want those marks to go. Looks like there is a good section in here that just needs a little bit of something. Kind of looking back, and I think I will do that over here also, and if suggesting where it might go, but I'm just not certain exactly yet, so I'm just playing with that. And that will probably take 2 layers to really come out. Okay, so that shows a little bit of how you can build on second layers on top of an initial foundation, and kind of help yourself see where you want things to go. The tricky part about this is that now I have all of these bulky layers that are all overlapping and interconnecting, and I'm going to have to decide which one of these is in front, which one is behind, and that needs to happen on the next layer. Some of this area you can see that I went a little dark initially, and so when I come back in, some of that you know, it's starting to already look like, you know, that's behind this, but maybe I want to push the other one back. I might have to do a second layer of similar colors and small marks, making those choices to help myself understand where to put some of the small shadow details. So it's a process, and it has to do with, you know, what do you want? Which parts do you want? There's no right or wrong there. Oop, looks like I should have used my, kind of pulled a little bit of, put a droplet over here. I had a droplet that exploded from my painting. But, so that area is going to stay damp. Doesn't look like I'm going to be able to salvage that accidental swipe I just did. I had a drop of water that went onto this leaf, and I wasn't thinking and swiped with my hand, and now I have marine blue headed down into this flower. So, and it's marine blue is a fairly staining color, so there's no way to get that out of there. It's just going to live there. This section, as you can see, is already done that second stage. This section, I have done some marks on the flowers to suggest what type of floral shape they might have. I've done some suggestions in the center. I have fairly thick, potentially overlapping leaf shapes happening. So now this is at a stage where I can come in with a second mid-tone layer. Not really doing shadowing yet, but just enriching with almost the same exact color, enriching certain areas. So I'm going to try to make sure to go from left to right because I'm right-handed, and from top to bottom, and I'm just going to go into the places that I would like to recede. So let's see, this, whatever this shape is, that's going to be behind that one. This area I want to recede into here. I want this guy to be behind. Can make some shape adjustments if you need to. I don't like the square quality of this particular leaf, so I'm going to come in here and make it feel like it is kind of bent over, and I think I need to fill it all the way up to the petal edge. So leave this open and bring some definition into these. I want them to feel like they're folded over in a few places. So I am going to come in with a little bit of shading. Let's see, I can do that here as well. I think I might want part of this leaf to be open and part of it to be closed. So I'm just going to put the suggestion of that in and put some color on the bottom. And then let's see, over here looks like I have two overlapping shapes going. I think I probably want the edge of this to be somewhere like here. Now, if you have drawn your pattern from, like, let's say you went on and you found the exact flower that you wanted to paint and you've drawn it, you're still going to have these problems because you need to draw the outline of the flower, and then what's going to happen is it's going to, the underpainting is going to get bulked together, and you may still have the pencil lines there, but they might be hard to see, and it's really not a good idea to have pencil lines that are too strong because it doesn't look good. You can keep your pencil lines invisible. That's helpful. So I'm just coming back in here. It looks like I have done some of this already, but I'm being a little stronger about the main chunks. Looks like I did some gentle lining previously, and now I'm coming in and being a little bit more dominant about exactly where I want the foldovers to be. We know there's probably going to be some intense color coming all the way back into the center of these. Let's see. And I just wet my brush, and then I tapped it off, and I'm going to get rid of some of the blockiness of these. I have to work quickly to do this. I don't want to spread the color too much, but because I want to reserve a lot of these lines and preserve some of the under patterning that I've already done for the flowers, like the petals, striations on the petals, but just doing a little bit of that in a few places goes a long way. Changed my mind about that, so I'm gonna try to blot that out. And I think I'm gonna blot this one and that one just a little bit. Come over here. I'm gonna make this one a little bit more purple. Looks like I have done a similar thing with this one previously. So I'm just kind of coming in to some areas. You'll notice I'm overlapping between petals because this isn't the final, this isn't a shadow step per se. This is still the local color of the leaf. It's not, or the petal. It's not a shadow color. It's more of a just another version of the petal color. So while it will push some petal parts back and other petal parts forward, it won't do it in the same way as a application of some shadow colors will. I'm trying to do that kind of light. You know, even if you look at a flower, even if it looks like it has some similar color throughout, depending on how the light is hitting it, there always is a variation. I don't know what kind of flower this is really. Maybe I want to, maybe this is more of a dahlia. Maybe I want to bring this closed. Let's see if I can still do that. Yep. So I'm just kind of closing up. And they look like very messy, light little layers, which they are. I'm not working off any kind of picture reference. I'm just going with working on the idea that I'm laying in some color, pushing back, practicing, pushing back areas and keeping areas in front without a specific color sample in front of me, because I'm not interested in perfection on this one. I'm interested in completing the layers and working on practicing seeing what step I'm on and what I need to do next. Pretend this leaf is folded under, and this leaf is going to be folded under so it won't be pointy. I can't go further into there. I have to leave that white because it's right next to a white part. So, but let's do that over here too, and just bring this out a little more and have that go behind there. And it worked a little further over on top. It's time to come over here. Okay, so just providing some additional color on here, kind of working the pattern a little bit. Maybe it has bluer center on this one with some jagged. Thinking maybe this one is more of a daisy type. So you might have some daisy type edges. And you can see that the only trouble with this is that right now this is light enough that you can right now see a line, and so it would have been smarter if I knew I was going to do a daisy type leaf on this one to begin my first layer with that in mind. But as we build up, I'm going to darken up these edges anyway, and so you will barely see those lines. And even if you do, like, it's okay with me. Sometimes it's okay. I need a different color that I don't have on my palette here. I'm just going to build something for this. Let's build more of a golden, continue to build more of a golden color here. Always working out like rays of the sun, because flowers like the sun have radial symmetry. And I'm just pulling out some interesting layers. I think I'm going to leave that at that for a bit. I think I will end up doing this center a little bit darker, and so that is going to happen with a lot of the shadows, and I don't want to overwork the orange until I have shadow colors with me. This is a little bit wet. This fun little leaf went pretty off track, it looks like. I can do, you can see how these two are overlapping, and if I want to push one behind the other, ooh, that's a little bit dark. That was a little bit dark. You can see how there's kind of a line forming there, but actually I'm not ready with my final shadow yet. So I'm going to come in and spread that because I'm pushing it darker, but not necessarily pushing it all the way to a final shadow. I'm just getting another layer of interest on these leaves in a few places, and I'm leaving a little stripe of the original color down the center of the leaf in a few places. You could leave less, you could leave more. It just depends on what you want it to look like. And if you're working from a reference photo, then then you're looking at that reference photo for areas for the looking to see, like, does the leaf have a dark center? Does the leaf have a light center? Does the leaf have can you not see the center because it's curled over? Which way is the leaf facing? Because really we're thinking about shapes, not defining every single little bit of the leaf. Let's see, this is a yellow and a pink. So I'm going to come in with a color that's a little bit lighter, kind of a salmon here. Let's see if that salmon, it's not quite the right salmon here. Quinacridone rose maybe. Oh yeah, I think it was the same. See, I'm looking back, I think I did these at the same time, and I think this color collection of colors also applies to this page. So I didn't write that. That would have been helpful. I would have written that, but I didn't. So I'm thinking about this as the back and just adding some curving structure. I already had that in a few places on the other ones, so I didn't need to do it. But in this one, I have this funny area that turned blue. It's a sketch. It's fine. Sometimes people go for that. Sometimes that's part of what people want to see in their piece, and that's fine. That's a style. I didn't get any more color on these leaves yet. Just going to do a little bit of depth on these leaves in a few places. I'm mainly focusing on leaving lighter centers. I could be working with a small brush and doing lots of detail, but that's not something that I'm going to do yet in this demo, and I could do that. These were already a little bit dark, so I decided to just leave them fairly dark and work in bigger sections, giving the suggestion. I mean, they definitely look like leaves, and so they're not going to have as many details, but then something like this, maybe I will come in with more of the shadow colors and work this a little bit more. So let's go back so you can see the difference. This is about 3 steps, 3 layers. This one is more like 2. So you can see this is sort of where this one started. Let's see if this is, it feels a little cool, but I think it's ready. All right, so now that I have these layers all established, I can do what I did in this other piece and come in and decide, you know, who's in front, who's behind. And part of that is going to be happening with shadow colors. Oof, this is a little bit intense, mixing up a color while I'm talking. Part of that's with shadow colors, but also part of that can happen with your local color. So I'm going to put some making some texture marks, suggesting that this leaf has stronger texture to it. I'm going to worry less on this one about the center. And I'm going to bring this all the way to the front. I should have started over here. Okay, let's see. I think, which one do I want in front? Which one do I want behind? I think I will put this one in front. So I'm going to paint it first. And then this one will go behind. And I'm going to make, and this is going to be the other side of it. I think I'll put this one in the back. I'm just looking about it and kind of thinking as I go. And I'm going to go ahead and connect all of these with a little bit of green. That highlight stands out. And give some, the brush I'm working with is a 4, a little big for doing details, but I'm not on shadow colors yet, so I can do some things with this. Come in. Kind of like, sometimes you maintain a lot of that lightness and sometimes you end up covering up a lot of it because you realize it was actually a little bit too light. I'm just putting a little more texture in. Bringing some color in, but trying to leave. Let's see, this is a little awkward the way this connects up here. Let's do this one first. This looks like it's on top. And then it looks like we've got kind of a hidden leaf underneath there. And you can see, well, if you had a reference photo, you probably would avoid some of the mistakes I made on this one by just doing kind of a free-flowing sketch. But you also might end up making, you know, getting these clumps together and then not knowing, not being able to remember without really looking at your reference photo. Okay, which one was which one was in front of the other. So you can see now that I've finished that section how I'm definitely just working in a little bit more texture. I haven't started to pull in any red in with the green to break the green a lot and put some points of shadow in there to really push the leaves yet, but I'm just bringing in some texture that's still in mid-tone that makes it more interesting. Then, so you can see these other pieces, you know, they have some texture. They're a little bit interesting, but they're not nearly as interesting and varied as these. And I'm doing it softly. I'm not looking for perfect detail. I'm not looking at a reference photo where I'm, you know, trying to exactly match a leaf structure. I'm just suggesting that these leaves have some texture to them. Have to be a little careful going up into this green here. And you can see sometimes I'm going outside the lines. That's okay. You just have to remember that, you know, if you go too far or too much outside the line, you can only cover so much with the really dark colors because they're still see-through. So this leaf's a little different. a little difficult here, a little curved over. Something like that. Be interesting. We don't have to know exactly how it's curled. We can just suggest. Like this one, I'm going to make this one go further behind. And I'll really have to bring that depth out with another additional line that would be a shadow line, but for right now I'm just going to add a little line there, bringing out some stripes. And I'm continually remixing a little bit of my paint, kind of changing the tone a bit, so it's not always exactly the same color. Kind of working in this area and going back and forth between here and here, because those are the two places on this board. I also have some over here. Now, I don't necessarily suggest that you do this all the time. These are studies, and I don't want to waste all of this paint that's on my palette. So that's how I'm doing it, because I know that those colors are close to what's here. And so that, for me, for this exercise, that's what works the best for me, so that I'm not using colors that I already have worked up on my palette, and I am not pulling out a whole bunch of new paint, because you can use it again once you pull it out, but you only have so much paint in your tube, right? So you do kind of want to think about, like, if you have a limited palette going, then that gives you the opportunity to reuse that paint for multiple things and then switch over. Or you can have, a different plate that has a combination of other colors on it. Kind of trying to be careful, because I don't want to put my hand, trying not to put my hand too much onto this other painting on the right. I mean, ideally you might do your painting on the left, kind of work on the stages on this one, and then work on the stages on this one, but I had it backwards because that's what I already had in my journal, and that's just what had to happen. So that's the stage it was at. So I'm just trying to keep my wrist from dropping too much. I think I'll switch back to in here. Looks like I have this growing in that direction. So I'm going to do my texture in that direction, both sides. And I'll do the same thing down here, just add a little texture. This one, add some texture. This is where I think about how important art can be for any person, but especially for young people. The idea of, if you do a painting, think about all the decisions that you're making just to make that one painting. And if you can somehow, if you're someone who is needing to build confidence in an area, or just wanting to explore something different, this could be a really great exercise. And if you're doing it as an exercise, like these sketches are for me, I'm not really that worried about the final product. It's more like I'm just thinking of it as this big puzzle, and I have all these different pieces, and I got to design the the colors of the pieces, how the pieces fit together. I get to design all aspects of my little world, just as if somebody were writing a novel. You get to design your characters from the ground up and exactly what they're doing. And for me, I find it just super meditative and really fun to play. When I am in the middle of a struggle with a bigger piece and I don't know what decision I want to make, that's where it's not very meditative, not as much fun. And so that's why it's really nice to have a journal like this and go through the process of understanding, you know, what colors do I like, what colors mix together to give me the kind of shadow colors that I like. How strong do I have to paint the different layers so that I have room to add shadow colors later on, so it's light enough that I retain my highlights. And you know, how do you leave highlights in as you're working? All of the different things you have to do, all the decisions you make, it's a lot. So you can see now these are closer. I haven't done the flowers yet, but it's starting to get to a closer level where these are starting to look like they're both on level 3. You know, layer 3 has been completed. I am going to do a little bit more color, suggesting the outline of a couple of these because I want to, and try to be, it's almost like each time you work, you try to do a little bit less. So kind of putting in some places where I may end up going over that section just in a shadow color. But I can also kind of bring out some of the color so that it is mixing together. So you're starting to see, that's the idea. These mid layers, you can just keep going with multiple mid layers and putting little dots and dashes and lines in places. You're starting to use smaller marks to describe shapes and areas and push. You can push leaves back, push them forward, make texture. And then, you know, the final piece is starting to really add those shadow colors and come up with a work that, you know, has additional depth in it. So that's the next piece. But these layers can keep going depending on how slow or quickly you want to go and how willing you are to paint next to each other in spots and how much isolating you want to do. So there we go. There's some different florals brought up to a similar level as the landscapes in the other video.